So, good evening, good morning, I suppose, afternoon, and good evening, wherever you might be in this hyper-connected world. Thank you very much for joining our webinar, From Chaos to Clarity, or Reinventing Experience Management with Agentic AI. The format of today's session is going to be a panel discussion. It's going to be pretty informal, so we're just going to bounce some questions around each of us. There are 3 polls during the course of the webinar, which is a thinly veiled trick to make sure you're all engaged, but it will also help us inform some of the conversations that we have. There's also the opportunity for you to ask questions, and if you have any questions, please put them in the chat, and we will get around to as many of them as we can at the end of the webinar. I'm joined by a brilliant panel of people. I'm not going to try and introduce them. I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves, but I'll go first. So, Waller, I'm in charge of strategic partnerships for Datamatics in the research and analytics space. My background is in market research operations, and I've been doing that for 35 years. As head of operations in 60 countries, COO of another organisation, and various other roles. So that's me. Vishal, maybe I could ask you to introduce yourself.
Sure, Andy. Hope you guys can hear me well. So I lead the CX function offering consulting and advisory to Datamatics clients, which helps them improve their customer experience. Been here since last 5 years, and prior to this, spent last 20 years in the space of insights, consulting, and operations. My academic background is a mix of economics and consumer psychology. I think that's the right mix for me to wear the consumer hat when I'm advising the client. Very excited to be here.
Thank you, Vishal. Mark.
Say Marco.
I did.
Hi, everyone. My name is Marco. I'm a founder of a global HR and outsourcing firm. And now we've basically focused on the next evolution, which is obviously AI. And over the last couple of years, been able to build some really cool tools within the shipping industry, finance, debt collection, customer service, ticketing, and all that sort of stuff. And we're moving on to some really cool stuff, building some 5th gen AI tools, which I think will be really exciting. It should be really useful for the markets coming up. So yeah, that's where we are.
Thanks, Marco. And Matt, over to you.
Thanks, Andy. Hi, everyone. I'm Matt Trickett. I work for a company called Qualtrics. We're the world's largest and leading experience management technology provider. As an organisation, our mission is to help businesses become more human, and we do that by helping them to understand and improve their customer, employee, brand, and product experiences. My role at Qualtrics is an experience management strategist, and I'm based out of the UK. Within my role, I work directly with organisations to help them determine how and why Qualtrics would be best suited to bring their strategic objectives to life by providing things like technical expertise, best practice guidance, advisory, and thought leadership.
Excellent. Thank you, Matt. So as you can tell, a diverse panel with lots of expertise. We challenge us all with some challenging questions. But before we do that, I'd like to start with our first poll for everybody. So the question for you is, where is your organisation in its we'll have a couple of minutes for you to answer that poll. It's disappeared from my screen, but hopefully you saw the options. Great. So the options are just starting, exploring tools and strategy, running surveys but struggling with silos, that we can probably all have some integration, but insights are slow, you might be advanced, you're using AI in real-time dashboards, or you're not sure. And I'll give you couple more minutes to answer that, and then we can have a look at the results. Any predictions from our panel? What do you think is going to be the most popular response? Mark,
I think
you look
some
like a gambling man
integrations.
to me. Yes, have some integrations. You're going to go for that, but insights are slow. Vishal, Matt, are you going to put your money where your mouth is?
I'd probably jump on board with Marco. I think having done these before, I think that's probably typically where we see most of the audience, but let's see.
I think the perception is a perception-led question. People think they have the right integrations and they're struggling, but I think it's lack of it. So I go with Marco and Matt. I think people might say integrations, but let's see what we get.
Yeah, okay. I wonder, are we ready? I mean, are we ready to get some results, guys? Is this
evenly
okay?
split?
So these are the poll results. Okay, very evenly split. I'm really glad I didn't say what I thought it was going to be, though, because I thought it was going to be running surveys but struggling with silos. It shows you. Okay, so an even split there across all of them. I'm surprised that 25% of our people are using real-time dashboards and agentic AI. So we've obviously got some pretty advanced enterprises on. Okay, so that's great. Thank you everybody for filling that in. We're going to go now to our first topic. So what we'd like to discuss first of all is what we've called Band-Aid CX, and that's possibly that might sound a bit derogatory, and it's not intended to be. It means, we've all, I think, experienced when you've implemented one platform, you've maybe had a different platform for your customer relationship management, you've got a different survey platform, etc., and somehow you've tried to make each other, and so that's what we mean. It doesn't necessarily mean that anyone's doing a bad job, right? It means that you're probably doing a really good job, but it might be a bit harder than it needs to be. So anyway, let me start, Vishal, with you, if I may. What is, from your experience, what does Band-Aid CX look like, and why is it a problem?
I think it's a great start, actually speaking, because what we're trying to say is that the core values of the company are that customer experience is important, and not having the right tools for it will not come in the way of measuring customer experience. So people are so much committed to it, and companies would want to get feedback, and they don't want to wait for a right platform coming their way to make it easier. So even if it is a patchwork to say, okay, I will send my surveys on a particular platform which is different from my main platform, the surveys are designed somewhere else, reporting is complex and customized, every feedback that we get is getting reported on some other escalation matrix ticketing platform. So it might be cumbersome all put together, but I think hats off to such companies who are doing it and trying to appreciate the value that somebody can get from customer experience. Just that the effort involved is so high that leaders might start believing that they're doing a lot of work, and they might tend to assume that just collecting feedback itself is the part where the fulfillment comes in, whereas the real value will start coming in if you reduce the effort here and probably focus more on the customer experience side of it instead of the process.
Yeah, great, good point. I mean, it's interesting. Right? I don't think any company these days doesn't care about customer experience, right? I'm old enough to remember when it was called customer satisfaction, and really it was about people's bonuses, the point of measuring it, and not so much about perhaps delighting customers. But I think that's changed. Marco, what do you think? Have you What's your experience in this area?
Yeah, I think, you made a good point. It does sound like it's a negative thing off the tongue, but I think a lot of the managers that they tend to don't don't plan things out. It's hard to sort of zoom out and plan things out, and they start adding bits and pieces and all these different tools. And what tends to happen is you have all these segmented tools that's kind of meant to, help the customer experience, but because they don't really interact with each other, um, companies tend to waste a lot of energy and resources, and you don't get the same results. So I believe that bringing in, especially there's a lot of new tools that glue and build scaffolding and unify a lot of the Zendesk, WhatsApp, even spreadsheets, Slack into one unified dashboard. I think, these are some of the really cool, interesting solutions that are pretty low hanging for it to solve these band-aid solutions. But yeah, I think they're on the right track. I think it's a good place to be.
So thank you. And Matt, I mean, you obviously have some experience here, so yeah, it'd be great to hear from you on this.
Yeah, thanks, Andy. I mean, I agree with both what Vishal and Marco said, right? I think it is that approach of taking a short-term fix rather than a long-term viewpoint from that perspective. The idea of kind of sticking a band-aid on a problem rather than thinking about the long-term strategy and putting an approach in. And we do see a lot of examples of this, and I'm more than happy to share one to the group. I'll keep it anonymized, but an example of a client that we work with, a big kind of global consulting company, where they first applied a band-aid approach and have since applied a more thought out strategic approach down the line. They have a contact center where a lot of the time they are using that for change requests. And previously, to be able to do those change requests would require you ringing up that contact center, be on the phone for a long time, be directed to the right department, validate your security checks, have the correct motion that you want to try and put in place, but then have to wait a few days for that to be approved. And the company decided that their band-aid approach, but what they thought was the right approach at that time, was to just open up more channels for the customer, right? Give them more ways to submit those requests, whether it be email or paper, thinking that that will reduce the burden on those contact centers. But actually all it did was actually increase the burden, because those emails and those paper trails that came through required even more manual input than just waiting on a phone call and being able to handle it in the right way. What they've now done instead is actually understand that this is an end-to-end approach where the CX program and the contact center needs to work together. And they think about it now actually where they apply a form in an electronic way online, which they think can get about 90% of their customer base using it. But what that form does is it instantaneously validates the security check, because it matches the customer login ID to the information they've already got in their system. It also enables the customer to see their progress as they move through each step along the way. They're not waiting 3 or 4 days to see if it's been approved. And what that does actually as a result, rather than a band-aid of we'll offer you more options, but we think that might fix it, is they've actually now been able to quantify that reduces time for manual input. It enables them to have increased productivity. It gives them better SLA performance. It makes better customer satisfaction. So all of those things together, I think, is a good example of what we think of as band-aid versus actually applying a strategic lens and putting the right solution in place for a customer.
Yeah, excellent. I mean, that's a really good example, right? And we've all had to wait, I think, for for our call to be answered. The last thing you want is to make that wait any longer. And I don't know about you guys, but the number of times that I've had to give the same information to 4 or 5 different people, I mean, it's maddening. So I do sometimes wonder whether the people that are responsible for customer experience need to try and get in touch with their call center. Okay, that's a great anecdote, Matt. Thank you very much. And I'm going to now reverse the order, and I'm going to come back to you. So you've given us one example there of how an organization took a more strategic approach. But how about taking the approach of fixing this sort of fragmentation with end-to-end CX platforms, and obviously Qualtrics is the biggest. And so again, I'm hoping you'll have some expertise to share with everybody here.
Yeah, more than happy to do that. I think there's some perfect industries, right, that lend themselves to kind of thinking end-to-end CX programs. Banking, utilities, retail, travel and tourism, I think is one I'll particularly touch on. I think in those kind of industries, you've got the process of everything from awareness and discovery of what you're trying to achieve, to making your decisions, to having an experience, interactions with the brand, to then actually coming home and having an opinions whether you want to share that on a third party source, or whether you want to sign up to be a more loyal or return member from a holiday perspective from that point of view. So that's an end-to-end process that takes place. But ultimately, along that end-to-end process are multiple different channels that you'll probably interact with a brand as well. You'll probably go online to do your search in the first place to choose where you want to go. You'll probably speak to the concierge or the front desk, or you might interact with an app whilst you're having that experience. You may, when you get home, email, or you may contact them via third-party source to give a great review or a scaling review. And if you then contact the contact center, you're probably using calls and chatbots and everything else that goes along with it. And I think the real important thing when we think about that transition from a fragmented experience to a true kind of CX journey is one that doesn't treat each of those channels and each of those touch points in isolation, but actually is enable them to bring together and understand, why did I make those choices, and why do those things after that happen? When do they happen? How do they happen? And how should I be able to go and fix it? And like I said, we're lucky. I'm lucky that I work with a great platform that enables us to piece that together. But I think the important part of being able to do that more so is for the customer, right? By being able to put together that end-to-end journey, it showcases to them that you understand them, that you care, that you want to improve things for them, but also that you can activate on the front line people better to do their jobs, because you can utilize them, give them the information that they need to help understand that end-to-end view and really target and overall improve that customer experience collectively. And I think those businesses that do that well are able to link every single aspect of that together down in one chain, and actually be able to apply the right things at the right time. That's going to keep that customer lifetime value and hopefully reduce things like churn and things like that down the line as well. So yeah, I think that's probably where I'd stand in seeing the difference between the two.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. And Vishal, coming to you, it's not just, of course, about putting a platform, right? I mean, you need to understand the customer journey and you need to be able to integrate that platform and things. But what in your experience of a successful transformation from fragmentation to joined up thinking and an end-to-end approach, could you share something?
Yeah, sure. I think at the core, we need to be clear what is the kind of single most item that you want to focus on in the CX program. And I think that without any debate will be, how do you close the loop? The NPS score doesn't matter. How many people responded doesn't matter. What is happening on the dashboard doesn't matter. It's about how many people were easily provided an option to reach out to the brand and share their experience, especially if something is not going right. And how fast do you close the loop? The advantage of having that end-to-end CX platform compared to the banded approach that we discussed is that, like we said, the banded is too cumbersome to be able to exactly take the insight out and take action. With the whole end-to-end thing being in place, you free up all your bandwidth to focus on exactly what the customer is saying and take action. It is not necessary that every time a customer responds after every transaction, even if it is driven by a natural trigger. So it will not matter as much. But for those opportunities when things go wrong, it is then how fast do you get back to working on those part of it. It's like we train our front desk staff that every time a customer comes, you smile and say thank you. It doesn't necessarily mean that every customer is going to reciprocate to you, but then there is an opportunity to improve a relationship. In the same manner, with the whole end-to-end thing, every transaction is an opportunity to get feedback. You may get a feedback, you may not, which is completely fine. But how the platform makes it easy, where the effort index of the customer keeps going down on how fast and easily they can reach to the brand. And once you have it, customer then becomes a co-creator of the experience for what he wants. And that way the customer as well as the brand both gain.
Yeah, I mean that's critical, right? This idea of closing the loop. Marco, from your perspective, then, fixing the fragmentation and closing the loop, perhaps. Anything you'd like to share with us on that?
Look, I think Matt and Vishal pretty much covered the main bits, but I will add though that highlight that the real issue is that it's siloed, right? And there isn't any connectivity between the journey from when you first engage them and, as Vishal says, when you close that loop. Now, while end-to-end platforms are the ideal scenarios, there's a big hurdle for a massive company to rip out old technology and to, transition into a full end-to-end CX. So sometimes it's a little bit in between, but definitely that fragmentation can be solved with end-to-end, but you can glue some useful tools together, but definitely closing that loop and getting all those different siloed connected up. I think that's the real key.
Yeah. Okay. Great. I mean, I think that's absolutely right. And an interesting point, that actually sometimes better glue might be what you need, or it might certainly be a smoother path to implementation. Okay. Great. Now, so we've talked then about the sort of fragmentation. Let's say now you've implemented your end-to-end solution, or you've deployed better glue within your organization. But how about now then thinking about globalization and localization, and the things that you have to think about as you move, as you think, rolled out an end-to-end platform globally. What do you need to think about as you deploy it locally for different customers? Vishal, I'm going to come to you first on this one, please.
Yeah, sure. So each of the customers that a brand has, I think they experience the whole brand from their personal context, whether it's the culture, the brand exposure that they have, which are in the competition set, or the kind of values that are there in that market, which is important. So while a global program is a great idea, you have to localize it from that customer context perspective. That really, really matters. And that doesn't mean only that it is about localizing the content in terms of language. That is a more functional part of it. Let me talk about an example. I think there was this case that we were working on with a client, which had rolled out a whole CX program across 20 countries. It's a B2B company, and they were running it specifically in a relationship format of a survey, running it once a year. So it was doing wonderful. I think whatever data that we could find from it, it was great. But specifically for a market like India, which is very diverse, they got the feedback, but it was not actionable to in any manner. They would get scores which fluctuate, which doesn't correlate with the kind of business that they had. So in spite of somebody giving a very high score, the attrition of customer will still continue, and so on. So they asked us to get onto it and consult them on what probably might be going wrong. What we found as we analyzed and as we spoke to customers as well is that considering the market and most of the customers, clients were on the move, they have all their connect over WhatsApp. So all the account managers speak to this customer via WhatsApp, and that's how the conversations really happen. Whether it's about order booking, any kind of inventory challenges, any changes in the kind of customization or the mix of products to be sent. So the key conversation between the two companies were happening on WhatsApp. Email was more of a confirmation of purchase order and invoicing. And that's where we realized that the moment you are sending surveys via email, which is the default way, they were getting forwarded to junior guys to provide some answers and action. So the gap here was in the localization, which would have covered everything with respect to language, the way skills had to be administered and everything. But they never localized the channels which might be relevant for it. For a market like India, where WhatsApp has almost become a quasi-default conversation mode for business, there has to be an integration of that sort where the surveys would reach the stakeholders directly via WhatsApp for him to respond upfront rather than forward an email to somebody else who might not be having the right idea. So localization matters. You need to figure out what those parameters are, which is different from the rest of the world, and I think have a take at it.
Yeah, great. Thank you. What about are some cultures more or less likely to feedback and complain? Is that something else to be considered? I remember when I was at McDonald's, I used to work at McDonald's, right? But they taught us how to address customer complaints, and they also told us some statistics, something like only 1 out of 10 customers actually tells you that they've got a problem, but they sure as hell tell another 10 people if they don't tell you that they've had a problem, right? So it's really important to be able to get that feedback from customers. So yeah, one is making sure you're in the right channel and those all ears are on. And another, I suppose, is understanding, whether culturally people are more or less likely to give you that feedback and how you can get it. Matt, any thoughts from you on that?
Yeah, I think I can build on that one, Andy. And I worked closely with McDonald's for many a year, so I know that pretty well. But I think we need to think about it also if we take a more of a globalization stance, like that thought process of applying a kind of one size fits all metric or one size fits all target specifically that can be met globally. It always seems like a great idea on the surface for businesses, but actually, to your point about cultural differences, can be really problematic. We work with a massive major global retailer, sporting retailer, and they did exactly that. They rolled out a CX program, gave a standard NPS target across the globe, and said everybody needs to reach that to be deemed as good standard. What they didn't take into account is that NPS was created out of the United States, that different markets have different opinions of what NPS could be, but also different markets have different scoring thought processes when they come to give reviews on feedback. If I think about us as Brits, you and I, we are probably more passive in regards to our thinking. If I think about countries like the Nordics, they're far more modest and they've got far more humility, that they don't want to give as much feedback and they're not likely to give us higher score. Or if you think about someone like the Netherlands, their interpretation of a fantastic experience is once in a blue moon, and that's a 9 and a 10. Everything else, if it goes really well, is a 7 or an 8. So if you've got an overall target from that perspective that everyone's got to meet, but you haven't taken into account those differentiators, you've got a problem on your hand. And what tends to happen then is those who don't make target become disengaged, or they get hit with a whip to say you're not performing to the standard that we expect. And ultimately those kind of things lead to CX programs being deemed as a failure, when actually if the businesses have got those things right in the first place, understood those nuances, understood the cultural differences, and applied an approach that was more about improving experiences, no matter where you start, but where you finish, rather than hitting a metric and being judged on that, I think you have a very different mentality overall.
Yeah, I completely agree. Marco, you're something of a citizen of the world, Marco, aren't you? So
Yeah.
yes, you certainly have some views on this. What do you think?
Look, I'll share with you a very interesting perspective that we experienced. So when we were building our debt collection agent for Australia, right? And Aussies are famously notorious for being impatient, and they want to be direct, respectfully, no nonsense communication. So we had to be really careful in the way we designed the AI to communicate and the tonality, and there was no fluff. It was straight to the point. And any sign that it was kind of scripted or if it was overly formal, probably contrary to the Brits, you'd kind of just lose them, right? And in contrast to say, we demoed one for like a UK company, you think that one solution would fit all. I mean, it'd be nice for us to just kind of like, here's a product, here you go. But yeah, those subtle little nuances, even in, it sounds obvious, but having a British sounding person, AI, does make a difference, and the pacing of it. And so, yeah, I agree with what Matt said, in that I think you can judge the product, and just kind of like, hey, this doesn't work for us, right? But yeah, when you apply those subtle nuances and how the product's being applied, certainly in this scenario, the difference is night and day. So I thought it was really fascinating insight.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Thank you. I mean, you're right. The Brits and the Aussies are two countries separated by a common language. I think is what actually to describe the US and the UK, but I think it works just as well. I think it's time for our next poll. So we'd like to ask all of the people that have joined us, all of the attendees, to answer our next poll. The question is, the question I was hoping was, what's the primary goal of your XM strategy? Unless we've switched it. But let's do this one. So, what aspect of your current experience management program needs the most improvement? And you can only choose one of these: speed of insights and decision making, connecting feedback to actions, cross-team alignment, real-time visibility across touch points, or we don't have a formal experience management program yet. But you're not allowed to say that because, or at least no more than 25% of you are, based on your answers to the first poll. And I'm going to again ask our panelists to come out on a limb and say which one they think is going to be the most common answer. Who wants
I'll
to
jump
be
in first, Andy. I would predict getting action out of insight, but we'll see where that goes.
Okay, so speed of insights and decision making. Good. Does anyone have a different?
No, I agree.
Yeah, I think it is
agree with
connected.
No, the safe money's there. Oh, there we go. So a couple of people have turned off their XM program over the course of this webinar. So we've gone from 25% to 29%. But okay, cross-team alignment and real-time visibility across touch points so far in the lead. Good though, feedback to actions isn't, a high one, particularly as we've been talking about closing the loop and the importance of, it's not just about hitting an arbitrary benchmark. It's actually about, turning a poor customer experience into a great customer experience, right? And putting the tools in the hands of the people that are at the front line to do that. Okay, any surprises there, guys? What do you think? I think not.
I'm
Okay.
surprised, but I think it leads us nicely into the next couple of bits.
Yeah, I think it does as well. So now let's look at how is AI, and especially Gen AI, transforming how brands understand and serve customers. And Marco, I'm on this one.
Cool. Yeah. So for me, the highest impact I've seen is around data, especially in heavy voice heavy environments like debt collection, as like I mentioned before. With your old models where you used to have people ringing and there would be a couple of quality assurance managers trying to make sure everyone's performing properly. You could really maybe manage 2% of the calls and really break down and get insight, maybe 5-10%. Now with AI, obviously, you're able to not just transcribe the call, but extract real data, and even from the tonality. From our thing, we can say like, this person is really angry about this, right? Or really concerned about such and such. And, you move your data set from gathering 5%, and, they're kind of scrambled and subject to interpretation to 100% of the calls. And the data is super clean and it's very impactful. And when you get data that's structured and it's designed and extracted the way you should be, for that specific company, the impact is absolutely tremendous. They can train, you can train who your weakest performing caller. You can praise. You can, the best one is like you can kind of figure out if you're breaching any serious, regulations, right? And that's a big problem with a lot of these big companies that I'm sure are attending this call. So yeah, I think that's what I'm seeing is the harvesting of data and being able to translate it.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's previously been an incredible problem, and not just across experience management, but everywhere. The sort of the heaps of unstructured data that organizations have, and the inability to mine that effectively is definitely something that AI has addressed. Great, thanks, Marco. Matt, over to you. Same question.
Yeah, I completely wholeheartedly agree with what Marco said, right? And I think on top of that, I mean, that leads to increased productivity, that automated task routing, etc., just streamlines organizations. It enhances the customer support staff. It also optimizes personalization as well. I think that's something else we haven't kind of touched upon yet, but something that links back nicely to that end-to-end journey bit. That ability, because you're able to understand something far quicker and far faster using LLMs and stuff like that, you're able to become far more targeted to get the right solutions to the right people in the right hands quicker than you've ever been able to do before. But I'd almost want to take a slight tangent on the transformation of AI in a way. I think also AI is making businesses transform at the same time, and what they need to do to be able to get to a place where they can use AI. And I think we've seen a shift probably in the last year where there was initial buzz about purchasing AI, getting AI into your organization. If you don't, you'll have an element of almost FOMO because you'll be left behind if you don't bring it into place. To a point now where actually I think we're seeing a correction of the correct business approaches to enable AI to come in that's going to have the biggest benefit. One that's tied to key areas of support for impact, one that's tied for the betterment of the employee, one that's tied to successful change management, one that's linked to value and associated to business strategy overall, rather than just we need to have AI in our organization. So I think that's kind of a really key message, right? Transforming businesses because of AI, but transforming businesses because AI is going to make a big difference to what you can do. And if you don't do it correctly, it could actually be a prohibitor rather than a push forward for you as an organization.
Yeah, and that's an excellent point. Right? We've also seen the same thing. The CEO says to the CIO, "Well, what are we doing about AI?" And all of a sudden, people are scurrying around trying to find something to hit with the AI hammer, rather than saying, "Okay, well, where might it be best deployed in my organization?" It's a great point, Matt. Thank you. Vishal, same question for you.
Yeah, I think a few years back, we had probably heard about how contact centers changed significantly with AI coming into play. Every agent was equipped with what next best action should be. He doesn't have to figure out on his own. The AI will hear it and then suggest that. I think that's the moment coming out for the CX in the days to come, where through the agentic setup, uh, customer might not even have to really raise a ticket just based on the data that's available. The AI should be able to figure out what's wrong, uh, raise probably a ticket on its own, and then take it forward. But one of the case study that we were working recently with a client, this is in the space of OTT. Um, so a very large player wanted to analyze data, and they came up with that. Okay, tell me how can the experience get better? So each time you switch on your TV, you switch on the OTT platform, and you go through the whole content. And after going through the content, there are times when you just switch it off because you're not able to decide what you have to do. Um, so that's good. That normally happens. But this OTT platform insisted that every such opportunity is an opportunity lost for engagement. So somebody came and did not continue watching or was not entertained, probably got frustrated with the choices to be made. So that's a negative experience, and we should raise our ticket just based on that. It implicitly means that our recommendation engine that is currently there is not optimal. We should recommend, or rather, we should recommend far better. As we kept dissecting the data, the recommended engine was great, but I think it was treating an individual as an individual. That's about it. Not getting into the weekday, weekend kind of scenario or the day parts. Is the person starting their television during the day hours or night hours? And that impacts the choices of what somebody wants. typically, with somebody starting the TV during the day, then they're looking for short content less than 30 minutes. If they start post 10 p.m. local time, then they look for longer formats of content. Similarly, when they look at weekends, then they're looking for a lot more entertainment kind of stuff, which you watch and you forget. But during the week, they would want some value addition as well. So more serious kind of content to be coming in. So has you realized that practically the customer has not even raised a feedback or a ticket? He doesn't even know what is missing. But just based on a small set of 5 minutes that the customer spends surfing through the OTT options uh, through analytics and combination of CX, well, that's what is the driving factor of what makes you stay back on OTT for longer. We could provide a solution, and with additional personalized recommendation, I think in that sense, we're able to increase the engagement hours from on an average, or rather 15 minutes of an engagement in the weekday, which went up to almost 70 minutes. So that's a 5x increase, and that's really commendable that with data so much can be done.
And that, thank you, Vishal, because that also brings us on very neatly to our next topic. So, you know, we and the question is, what does true hyper personalization look like in action, and how can teams get started? And I think, Vishal, given that you're on a roll there, I'm going to let you just carry on to answer this one first, right? True hyper personalization. What does it look like? How do you get there?
Yeah, I think that's the example that we really spoke here. But I think where there will be the computational prowess that every person and individual can be treated as a segment of its own, and there is no lookalike segmentation required, where we don't say that, okay, here's a cluster of 20% of my customers, and then you start rolling out recommendations or any kind of initiative at the 20%. Then every individual is different, and today with AI and the kind of content and data that's available, you could actually have very, very customized responses for every person that might be coming in. So there could be two customers, uh, both having similar challenges, but based on their past feedback, based on demographics, based on the lifetime value of respective two customers, they're likelihood to influence somebody else. Two different options can be given, two different ways you can close the loop. And that's the kind of hyper personalization that's going to come in the world of customer experience in a big way. This is how the marketing has changed, the digital marketing that we know online, which is every segmentation is where sample size is just one. You are part of the segmentation and only you. Same concept starts getting applied in the CX world.
Yeah, although, you know, I must say, even with the advent of AI, I mean, I think 4 years ago, we did a webinar about connected data, and I complained that I'd once looked at a garden shed online, and everywhere I went since, I'm still followed by that shed. And AI doesn't seem to have fixed that for marketing. So let's hope it fixes it for the customer experience. Matt, what about you? What does true hyper personalization look like for you here?
Yeah, I mean, I think, first of all, Vishal hit the nail on the head with that one. But I really like that example there, Andy, because I was going to talk about kind of the various different examples of using that proactive approach to tell the customer what they want, almost before they've even looked at what they have decided they're going to want in the first place. You know, I was thinking about things like those unique ads when you're browsing online, i.e. your garden shed, or recommended content when you're on a brand's website without you even realizing it's being recommended to you before it happens, or things like customized campaigns or dynamic pricing emails you get having just inquired about something with a company from the first place, or even just kind of those most proactive ways to communicate with an organization without you realizing that's actually how you prefer to be in contact with them in the first place. And I think the results are really strong there, right? I know we were thinking about this before we came online today regarding those small wins. And I was looking at a couple of stats, and Gartner, for example, say 90% of customers are happy to share data that enables hyper-personalization if it really enhances their purchase journey, or provides a unique experience, because what it does is it offers something you can't get elsewhere, and it makes them feel special, and it keeps you going back to them in the long term. But I also then looked at the flip side of it as where it can go wrong. And when you're not recognizing, for example, when a customer needs a specific need or wants to speak to a human instead of being forced down an automated, tailored route that hyper-personalized systems are brought together, especially as we move towards agentic, that says this is how this customer wants to interact, when actually I probably want something quite different, or to be able to speak to somebody in the moment and you don't give me that as an option, can be an example where brands can get it quite wrong. And I had a recent example of booking a flight where this exactly came to life, and a week down the line I still can't get to speak to somebody to try and make a small change on something that I'm going to do next week. And as a result of that, to cut my story short, despite the fact that they think they've got it right for me, unless they make that flight spectacular next week, they haven't quite understood me yet, and I probably won't be going back as a customer.
Yeah, great. What a great example. I bet we can all share your frustration. Marco, how about you?
I think Matt and Vishal kind of looked at it from a customer experience, but I thought I'd like you to look at it from a business perspective, right? Hyper personalization. And for me, like true hyper personalization starts like on a business level, right? And it means for me that if you're kind of building around a company's existing tools and workflows and kind of making it better instead of forcing them to change or take unnecessary risk. And a lot of companies, and what I've noticed, is are very hesitant on adopting automation or AI. They've been burnt, and because the system asks them to adapt rather than sort of like being hyper personalized, kind of look, all right, this is how you are right now, and I think it's too dangerous for you guys to try to whatever. Let's try to find a happy middle ground, and we'll work with that. And generally, what you'll end up happening is that everyone will have a better experience. It'll free up capital, it'll free up resources, and that can be given back to the customer or whatever. So I think the approach when from this sort of lens of hyper personalization is to really look into that business and into its really details and like really remove what's really really terrible, but try to keep what's kind of working and make it kind of better. And I feel like having an execution layer that fits with their existing model and their protocols or whatever, I think we can bring a lot more businesses to the next level. And I think that's sort of how I see hyper personalization from a business perspective anyway.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, actually. And we're hearing this really across the board. Hyper personalization, when it works, great, right? But when it doesn't, maybe watch out. And it does. It's interesting that we talked about the impact of generative AI. Nobody talks about replacing customer management people, customer experience people. No one's suggested that we're at the point now of being able to say, get rid of people. In fact, Matt, quite the opposite. Sometimes you need to talk to somebody, and you don't want to be talking to AI at that point. You want someone that can solve your problem, right? So we're some distance away, are we, from replacing people in this customer experience management?
I think I kind of see it differently. So for one of our clients, they're a big gaming company, and they manage a lot of different, gaming products and whatever. And the agents are kind of stuck, looking after one channel. And so we were like, look, as you expand, we should unify and centralize all of this into one place. Look at the data. And what you found is that a lot of the customer complaints or engagements can actually be solved by an AI, which means it frees up the real humans to tackle on the really complex stuff. So that I think it is what you could look at it like, yeah, we're going to replace you, but what you're really doing is engaging with those customers who are low hanging fruit, and then using your talented customer care managers and directing them where they really need to be, which are those high value, very difficult problems that they need to tackle.
Yeah, excellent, Matt. You're
I can't agree more than that. What Marco said, right? I think it's prime. I think you will continue to see not only the need for upskilled agents where AI can support that to make their jobs, their capability to do their jobs even better, But there's always going to be those roles where you're going to want to speak to a human. You don't want to speak to an AI person to get your doctor's results. You do not want to speak to an AI person to transfer money of large value between one institution and another, because you just don't trust it in the same way as you would trust a human interaction. And I don't know we're in a position yet to see where AI could be able to do those kinds of things. And whilst that's the situation, the importance of the human is more tangible than ever.
Yeah. Okay, brilliant. Thank you. And because I'm not AI, I'm going to make a decision not put the third poll up. And instead, so I'll ask people now, you can put your questions in the chat while I ask my last question to the panelists. But I think that would be a better use of our time than another poll. So there you go, a human decision there for right or wrong. So I'm going to ask each of you now for one practical next step, one concrete action. So if people did nothing other than this as a result of this call, what should this be? And Vishal, I'm going to come to you first. You're on mute, Vishal. I knew someone would do it. That's all right.
Yeah, that's why we are humans, right? Yeah, and as a human, I would say not just one thing. I will recommend two things that you should do. One more from a process perspective, which is map your moments better. I think that's what matters. Pick a few journeys where experiences are breaking down. It could be billing, it could be onboarding, it could be some other place. But pick one part of the journey, break it down completely, and see what can be done right instead of looking at things in an aggregate manner. That's more of how you look at data better. And I think from an AI perspective, pilot at least one part of the automation. It could be an auto reversal of money that you take based on certain kind of feedback, or you might be looking for a churn signal. But look for that one thing that you could probably automate and then try and see the results to be able to expand your AI journey into it. Don't look for an overall holistic solution where AI will overhaul the whole feedback system. Look for one or two such moments and then see what can be done there.
Great, thank you. Marco, same question to you, and you're allowed to, given that Vishal has now set that particular hair running, right? You can have two as well if you want.
Look, what I've noticed personally, and I think this will apply for most businesses who want to migrate and pivot their company towards the automation and AI route. And the real practical way to do that is to have a solid foundation. And the solid all good AI is built on top of great data, right? So I think before you even think about engaging, like think long term, like Matt says, and if you are going to do that, then invest the time to kind of have a look at where all the data are siloed. How are they stored, and are they actually friendly for large language models to be adopted? Because I think we're getting to the place now where it's like YouTube democratizing attention, or iOS democratizing people building apps on top. We are going to get to the point, I think we're there now. AI is going to be relatively easy to build, I believe, as time progresses. But if you get that foundation right, then you're going to be able to ride that AI wave in a more efficient manner, I believe.
Excellent, thank you. Matt, as many as you want.
I think for me, the one is just don't try and do this alone. I think the old proverb, it takes a village to raise a child, is really well transposed when you think about setting up a CX program or the world of moving towards AI in the future. And what I mean by that is I think it takes alignment across business units to be able to get the right synergy or what you're trying to achieve. It also requires the backing of exec levels to be able to make sure you can set yourself up for success. But more importantly, it's those different units and that collective kind of upper body that enables you to make sure whatever you're putting into practice is aligned strategically to what you're trying to do as a business from a collective standpoint. And what I'd do with those teams as you move forward is use them as centre of excellences or key governance groups to make sure you're consistently taking everybody's opinions and needs into account, so that when you're applying, whether it be an advanced CX program or an advanced AI approach moving forward, you're doing it in the right way. And it's those things that will create business cohesion. It will allow different parts to understand the role they've got to play in the betterment of the business. But it will also bring out things like customer centricity, because you're aligning yourself to what's important to your brand. You're giving something that the customers are most likely to see as a joined up approach. And overall, everybody's singing off the same hymn sheet, which should lead to success in the long term.
Excellent. Yes, thanks, guys. Okay, so sort of if I try and just pull that together for everybody. So look at the foundations, look at your data silos, get it ready for consumption by LLMs, because that's actually going to be the hardest part of implementing AI. Think about your customer journey, pick an area of it and understand it perfectly, and connected to that as well is your implementation of AI. Don't try to do everything all at once. Don't try and boil the ocean. Choose a low-hanging fruit, and put AI to that. And then don't try and do it alone. Change is hard. You need partners. You need internal sponsors. So reach out and you need centers of excellence and champions. So points from the panel. We've got 2 minutes left. We've got a couple of questions here. I'm gonna take this one first. How do you differentiate between a CX issue and an expectation management issue, and which one should be tackled first? Vishal, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, sure. I think it's a CX issue is a failure in delivery, that the service did not meet the standard, so that's straightforward. But expectation management is a failure in alignment. Maybe the sales guy promised a lot more, and I think it can be far more damaging. It could also be the root cause of any other future CX. So I think fix the narrative, clarify what is exactly the offer, and that might in fact help you reduce the complaints in a big way. So expectation management comes first. CX failures can be handled at any point in time.
Yeah, and it's sort of a mismatch between what the brand says about itself in its advertising and what the brand delivers in its customer experience, right? It's which is a big lookout for brands, I think. Okay, I've got another one here. Marco, I'm going to send this one to you. So, given that agentic AI can autonomously make decisions and take actions, how can we balance automation with maintaining a human-centric approach to ensure empathy and personalization aren't lost? Big question.
That's a very big topic. So I'll just kind of tackle it to one specific part. But I think for enterprise grade clients, which I'm sure they're everywhere here, you're going to need to have a human in the loop anyway. I think we're not really in that place where you can just sort of build an agentic, and I mean, we're playing around with that stuff, and it's I don't think it's good on a regulatory base. I think some of the stuff's really highly critical that some a human is in the loop. So I don't believe that that's going to be happening anytime soon. So I think if you just come at it from a place where, look, we're going to have to involve some of our key persons or whatever into that workflow, I think that's what's going to have to happen in the interim. I think that vision where it's just we kind of like let it go. I don't think we're not quite there yet, as much as I'd love to think we are.
So yeah, Ravi, that was your question. I think the message from the panel has been all the way through. Don't worry, right? At this point, there's still lots of places where human empathy and personalization is critical. Okay, we're out of time. So what I want to do now is I want to thank the panelists for your time and expertise. It's been really informative and really enjoyable. So thank you very much. Thank you to everybody who attended. Thank you for your questions. Thank you for your attention. We will be following up with some links to recordings and I think we'll probably ask you to give us a rating on the on how much you enjoyed the webinar as well, because we all like to measure these things. But thank you. I hope you found it as useful and enjoyable as I did. Thanks again, guys. Goodbye.